But write down your questions. We'll make sure that we get everything covered. Our goal is to get out of here by 11:30. We're going to try to stick to that. And we have a pretty concise program, so it should go through pretty quickly. Okay. We do have some amazing sponsors who are taking care of us today. So we do want to turn the time over to Monarca.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce
Yes.
it? Monarca Media.
Yes.
Hey,
Good job.
you
10
bet.
extra points.
Should we see if that's on? That's on. Okay.
Yep.
You're good.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paige. I'm with Monarca Media. We specialize in all things real estate media. So if you have a listing and you need photography, or if you want to do the cool social media reels, kind of like the one you see right here, we specialize in all of that. We also do immersive 360 tours. We do full listing marketing kits. So that's a property website, listing flyers, really anything you could need. We kind of cover it all. We do headshots. So I left a flyer on everybody's seat. So if you guys are interested in learning more, I'll be in the back, or that barcode will take you right to our website, and I'd love to have a conversation. Yay.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Paige. Okay. And obviously Monarca was inspired by the monarch butterfly, safe to say?
That's very safe.
Okay, cool. Awesome. They do great work. We actually had a client appreciation event 2 or 3 weeks ago at the Murray Aquatic Center. They came, I was blown away. Your turnaround on post-production was amazing.
Yes.
I think
24 hours or less.
Yeah. So really, really cool. I was hoping and am still hoping to show you the video that they shot and turned around in 24 hours. So it's pretty cool. Some of you have probably already seen it if you've been on Realtypath Agents Only or the Realtypath Facebook page. Okay. Okay. Let's also bring up our second sponsor, Anne, with First Rate Home Loans. And tell us how things are going.
Mike.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you guys? Obviously first rate home loans. So we're here all the time. So we're in-house here. Anything that you guys need for your purchases, sellers, home buyers, any mortgage product, we have it. So anything that you guys need help with, happy to help with that. That's about it.
Awesome. Tell us about rate drops. Didn't we just have a rate drop this week?
Yeah, huge, but definitely anything in the right direction. But they're expecting by the end of the year that we're going to continue to go down and see lower rates. And so capitalizing on that and helping your home buyers lock in as soon as possible as they start to go down. They're figuring about by the end of the year that we start to see some more rate drops. But that's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you provided food for us today, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Bagels, that, and then I think there's fruit back there from
Monarca.
Yeah.
What's the plan? To get it at any time or wait till the end?
That's up to you guys.
Wait till if you're really hungry and you didn't have breakfast and you need to, get through this, go get some.
So help yourself.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Just to draw attention to a few people making today possible, we are forever grateful for our amazing IT director, Chris Petty. If you guys don't know him, I'm sure you do because you probably run into tech questions all the time. He's the one running our tech in the background. And we're at 99%, Chris. So we were questioning whether or not we should update the TV. We took the risk. And our new 100-inch TV. How exciting. So the projector's gone. We had more. A lot of you said, I can see things better on this 75-incher. It'd be great if there was a big TV up front. So we went ahead and did that. And we're doing a few updates. You probably have noticed the new LED lights and stuff like that. So someone else who's making this possible is Linda, our managing broker here in Sandy. She's probably answered a lot of your questions. She's amazing. And we will be pinging things off of each other today, okay? Now, when we do get to the Q&A part, I've got this mic. It does a pretty good job of picking up, so you don't have to be like right to your mouth, but the closer to your mouth, the better. The people online will be able to hear better. and the recording will pick up better the closer you hold this to your mouth, okay? For now, I'm just going to put it right here until we get to that portion, okay? Before this updates or gets done updating, we can jump in. I do want to do a recap for those of you who want to know the details of the NAR lawsuit. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. So the suit started back in, I believe, 2020 in the state of Missouri. A group of plaintiffs got together and decided to sue the real estate industry, going after us for a class action lawsuit. Eventually winning that suit, the plaintiffs in that suit won. The background of the suit was basically making the argument that commissions weren't fully disclosed. Okay, so in the state of Missouri, their exclusive right to sell agreement did not stipulate how much would go to a buyer's agent. Okay, in Utah, we had that. We've had that for years and years and years. So had the suit not been consolidated into one big suit, I think Utah would have had a pretty good chance of fighting it, honestly. I'm not totally disappointed with how things turned out. There are pros and cons. To put your minds at ease, as a company, we are not part of the payout settlement, okay? For some reason, they chose 2022 kind of as an arbitrary year. They looked at the sales volume for 2022, and they said any company that had over $2 billion in sales volume would have to pay into the settlement. Realtypath was short of that, which is good. We're grateful. That doesn't impact you. What we've heard is that companies that do have to pay into it, that cost obviously probably gets passed on to their agents. So that's kind of the premise behind the suit. Now, what it did is it made a lot of changes nationwide. So NAR got involved. They said, let's settle this. Why don't we offer a payout? And anybody that wants to try to receive compensation from the class action lawsuit can try to do so if they feel like they've been harmed. I've been told time and time again that the biggest winners are the attorneys. So some larger companies are paying into the suit. And at this stage, we just want to talk about, okay, how does this impact our forms? So today we're going to be going over the forms. We're going to be talking about how to log into the Realtypath website and how to update your listings so you can put compensation on that as well. So we'll go over all that. Chris, is this ready to rock and roll? Okay. Okay. While this is rebooting, I do, for those of you who want, okay, hold on, it looks like it's connecting. There's a link. I'm initially going to take you to the UAR link for the NAR lawsuit FAQs so that we can go over that briefly. And okay. Huh? Go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so if you're looking for information to share with clients or to review yourself, I highly recommend that you go to utahrealtors.com. And what we will do is we're going to send out an email to all of you with a summary of this meeting. And we will include these links. Okay, so you'll be able to go here and download any of the information. I am curious, by raise of hands, how many of your clients have asked about this suit? So about half, maybe just over half. Okay. I've noticed that some people care, some people don't care. Some people don't even know. And And then you get some people who are really ambitious who say, well, you're out of business now, aren't you? And that's not the case. We're not out of business. There will always be, in my opinion, a place for a real estate agent. What this does is it does create downward pressure. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, okay? We talked about that in greater detail last time. I won't go into as much detail, but the reality of the situation is as it becomes easier to find homes and people become more educated on the home buying process, what we used to get paid, we may not get paid as much. So that's what I mean by downward pressure, okay? When we went through the exercise to see if we were under that $2 billion sales volume in 2022, we looked at the average commission per transaction side. Does anybody know what that was? If you were to guess. Yeah, you're really close. It was actually 2.25%. So back in 2022, that already showed me that, okay, we've already experienced some downward pressure. And there's a myriad of reasons why we would decrease our commission. You know, more often than not, we get close to the closing table and some issue comes up, right? And we agents typically chip in our commission. Now, one thing that came from this lawsuit is to move away from language that would imply a standardized commission, okay? In the past, we've often said, well, commissions are 6%, right? 3% goes to the listing agent and 3% goes to the buyer's agent, okay? That is no longer the case. There's no standardized commission. So some agents with some companies would say, well, I have to charge X amount because my company requires it, okay? That is now a violation of this NAR settlement, okay? The best way to summarize everything we're going to go over today is that everything is negotiable, okay, from the get-go. That means when you sit down with your sellers for a listing presentation, and they say, well, how much is the commission? You can negotiate just a listing commission. You don't have to negotiate a buyer's agent's commission. We'll get into those details and why I highly recommend that you do, okay? But it's all negotiable. Okay, and the way that the forms have been changed is to show that it's all negotiable, okay? So let's jump into that. What I want to do is I actually want to go over the forms that have been modified. And as of yesterday, the only form that hasn't been changed yet is the real estate purchase contract, okay? And we are going to show a small video. It's a 3-minute video that shows how it will be modified, okay? But let's go ahead and jump into the forms that have been modified. And I've gone through and I've highlighted the parts that have been modified, okay? And in fact, I want to actually just open up the PDF form. Hold on. Okay, so for the most part, the exclusive right to sell agreement has remained the same with these modifications. So under section 2, under brokerage compensation, I'm just going to read this part that's highlighted, okay? It says authorization to offer compensation to buyer's brokerage. The company is authorized to advertise or otherwise communicate that the seller and or the company is offering to pay compensation to a buyer's brokerage in an amount up to $ or percentage of the gross acquisition price. Brokerage fees are fully negotiable and are not set by law, any board or association of realtors, multiple listing service, or any manner other than between the company and the seller, okay? Let's go ahead and read 2.3. Compensation agreement between the company and buyer's brokerage. In the event the company agrees in a written compensation agreement to pay a buyer's brokerage, the seller agrees that the payment amount will be added to the brokerage fee referenced in section 2.1. The company may not agree to a written compensation agreement that exceeds the authorized amount in section 2.2. Okay? I meant to highlight that last sentence in red. On the other ones, you'll see it in red, okay? So let's let's talk about that real fast. You're at a listing presentation. You have a seller who says, okay, how much are the fees? You're going to tell them what your fee is. Okay. You get to pick that fee. Okay. If you want it to be 3%, you can say my fee is 3%. Okay, great. At closing, you'll pay me 3%. Now, what I highly recommend to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is you offer a buyer's compensation. You're going to get more buyers because the majority of buyers, something like 84%, NAR statistics, are represented by a buyer's agent. So if you want to entice a buyer to come to your home, you should offer a buyer's agent's compensation. Okay. And then they're going to ask, well, how much would that cost me? And then that's when you can say, well, it's up to you, but the averages range between, and then you can give them a figure. Okay. Now, what I imagine will probably happen in practice is you may get some sellers who say, well, I don't want to offer anything. Can I just put commissions are negotiable? The answer is yes. Yeah, you can do that. So as a listing agent, if you get a phone call on your listing and a buyer's agent is asking, hey, what's the compensation that you're offering on your listing? You can reply and say, well, my seller has not chosen a buyer's agent's compensation. However, it's negotiable. They're willing to let you write up an offer and put it in there. Okay. I could see that happening quite a bit in practice. Okay. What I imagine will probably happen in practice is that you'll have a predetermined negotiated amount. And when that phone call comes in, you'll say, yeah, the seller's offering 2.5% or whatever number. Okay. So that very last line is important. So there's been some argument going back and forth as to whether or not, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get to the buyer-broker agreement first, okay? And then I'll answer that question. Hold on. So you're going to see very similar language on the buyer-broker agreement. Oh, and by the way, both the exclusive right to sell agreement and the buyer-broker agreement now has this class action lawsuit language, where in section 8, it says the seller forfeits any and all rights to participate in a class action lawsuit. That's so we don't have a repeat of what's going on right now, okay? Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the buyer-broker agreement and some of the modifications that have been made, okay? Now, right off the bat under section 1.2, where it asks, or where you're supposed to put down what counties you operate in or that you'll be showing this buyer, I've been asked, can you put every county in the state of Utah? My understanding is yes, you can. Okay, nothing precludes you from saying every county in the state of Utah. Okay, or under the or section, you could say every property in the state of Utah. Okay, I've had some discussions where some attorneys have said it's better if you just put Salt Lake and Utah or Weber and Davis, you know, to make it more clear. Okay. Now, don't worry, I will talk about showings. We're going to get to that in a moment, but let's just finish this first, okay? So under section 1 down here at the bottom, it says, during the initial term of the exclusive buyer-broker agreement and any extensions thereof, the buyer agrees not to enter into another buyer-broker agreement with another real estate agent or brokerage that conflicts with this one, okay? Now, what's interesting is you may draft up a buyer-broker agreement that says, this is an agreement just for this property, 123 Apple Street, okay? But another agent from another company has written up a buyer-broker agreement for another property. Is that allowable? The answer is yes, it is. It is allowable. In the past, that would be a conflict and we'd be going through this whole issue of procuring cause and, no, that's my client. No, it's my client. There will probably be a lot of buyer-broker agreements potentially floating out there, okay? Where it becomes more restrictive is the more broad you are. If you say, I'm representing you for all properties in the county of Davis County, then another agent can't have a buyer-broker agreement that would cover all of Davis County. So in that regard, being a little bit more generic, a little more broad is more protective, okay? However, to secure a client, if you're prospecting a client says, well, I really don't want to sign an agreement with you, but I'll sign one for just this one property, that is allowable, and we will probably see instances of that, okay? Okay, let's go down to section 2.2. If a seller's brokerage and or the property owner is compensating the company on a property acquired by the buyer, then the compensation paid to the company by the seller's brokerage and or the property owner shall satisfy the buyer's obligation for the brokerage fee shown above, provided that the compensation is equal to the brokerage fee. The company may not accept total compensation from any source that is greater than the brokerage fee. In the event the compensation paid by the seller's brokerage and or the property owner is less than the brokerage fee, the buyer shall pay any remaining difference at closing, okay? Let's talk about that red section for a moment. Okay, I couldn't see it from here. What I'm gonna highly recommend you do on your buyer broker agreement, start high. Put 3%, put 4%, okay? And then tell your client, hey, my services are specialized. Because they're specialized, I hold the right to reduce my fee if a listing offers less, okay? So once again, everything's negotiable. It is, you can adjust fees. What I'm being told by the legal counsel from UAR, Salt Lake Board of Realtors, so on and so forth, is that you're not technically supposed to go up. Okay, so in your buyer broker agreement, if you only put 2%, but the listing offers 3%, the only way to adjust upward is if you're somehow offering services that would justify an increase in compensation, some specialized services. Okay. I've had some attorneys say, don't do it. Don't start low and then try to adjust high if the listing offers more. That seems to be the school of thought. If that's the school of thought, there's an easy solution. That's just put more compensation on your buyer broker agreement. Okay. And if your buyers freak out, you can say, don't worry, my plan is to match my compensation with what is offered on the listing. Okay. But if you're going up, somehow you have to justify that you're offering some specialized service that other agents don't. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. And once again, this is a repeat from what we talked about before, that everything is fully negotiable. And then you have that section that talks about that the buyer forfeits the right to participate in a future class action lawsuit. Okay. Now, let's go on to the next agreement. Okay. There is now the real estate brokerage compensation agreement, which I could tell just based on formatting was not, it was kind of a beta release. Like there should be spaces right here and there's not. So I'm sure we're going to get a full version prior to August 17th. Okay. This brokerage compensation agreement. So one of the questions that's coming up is, what role does the escrow instruction form play in future transactions? And can you still use them? I've been told that yes, you can still use it if you need to, but this form and the next form that we're going over are the two forms that should replace what we've traditionally used as the escrow instruction form to either reduce or increase commissions or apply commissions toward closing costs or concessions. Okay, so let's review these forms. By the way, all these forms are currently available on the MLS. Okay, so if you want to jump on, you want to look at them, I highly recommend that you do that because they go into effect August 17th. Okay, so let's look right here under section 3. This is a repeat. A lot of this language is a repeat of what's already written into the agency agreements. Okay, so you'll see buyer's brokerage may not accept compensation from any source that is greater than the buyer's obligation under the buyer brokerage agreement. Okay. Now this form right here is, you'll notice that you have signatures from both the listing brokerage and the buyer's brokerage, as well as the seller and buyer. It's all cooperative now. And do you remember in the past, it was a big no-no to include compensation in a rep C? It is now kosher. It's now okay. In fact, you're supposed to do that. Okay. Let's look at the next form, which is the real estate brokerage payment addendum. Now, I mentioned this in our last sales training. I hate the name of this form. I wish it had the word commission. There's been so many times I've gone to the form section, I'm trying to find this form, and I keep typing in the word commission when I'm looking for payment, okay? But this is the form that authorizes additional payments, okay? So if you're in a scenario where you're looking to get paid more as an agent, you can do so. This is the form that you would use to receive greater compensation. You'll see that the line or the phrase in addition is underlined. The UAR did that intentionally, okay? So if you're in a scenario where you're wanting to receive additional compensation, this is the form that you would use, okay? To my understanding, this is also the form that you would use or could use if you're dealing with one of those sellers that says, my compensation is zero. I'm not paying any buyer's agent's compensation. However, when you present an offer, include your compensation, I'll consider it. I think we'll have scenarios like that. This is the form that you would use, okay? And now to the last two forms, which are really, to my understanding, just going to be temporary forms. These are forms that are to modify your existing listing agreements or your existing buyer broker agreements, okay? I don't know. I'm going to try to be preemptive and guess one of the questions that will come out, which is, will we require this? Technically, yes, we are supposed to require as a brokerage to have all of you go out to your existing clients and say, hey, there's been some modifications to the law. We are now required to modify our agency agreements. This is the form that we have to use, okay? And you will see similar language. So this is the addendum to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement that now incorporates the language of compensation to a buyer's agent, okay? And then down here, same thing for a buyer when you're representing a buyer, but it includes that language that, you know, you may not receive compensation greater than what's in your buyer broker agreement, okay? Those are the main forms that have been modified, okay? And then we'll jump into questions here in just a moment. But before I do, I have one last form I want to go over. And that is our listing showing agreement, okay? This is a draft, but our attorney, who used to be the commissioner for the Division of Real Estate, we love her. Her name's Deanna Saby. If you need any legal questions that the legal hotline can't answer, we usually turn to her. She has helped us draft this. This is a showing agreement, okay? So one of the things that the lawsuit that came out of the settlement was that agents can't show properties without some form of or some type of agreement, okay? Now, the best thing to do, rather than using this, is to get a buyer broker agreement. You just get a buyer broker agreement, get one. Just say, hey, you know, state law requires me to get a buyer broker agreement. Will you review this and sign this? I think the majority will. You'll probably get some pushback where people say, nah, you know, I'm talking to you and I'm talking to a few other agents, but I don't want to commit to anybody yet. In those scenarios, we're going to use this. Okay, this will be made available on realtypathlibrary.com. Under the documents section, you'll be able to find it. And I won't bore you by reading it right now, but it does go, it basically is an agreement that allows you to show a property without committing the buyer, okay? And the one thing I don't like about it is it's almost as long as the buyer broker agreement. So I could just see people looking at the buyer broker agreement and looking at this and going, oh, fine, I'll just sign the buyer broker agreement. I think it's an opportunity to sell yourself. It's an opportunity to say, hey, let me tell you everything I'm going to do. And probably the best thing that you could do would be offer to have a consultation. We don't do this enough on the buying side. We don't offer enough to take them out to coffee, take them out to lunch, you know, let me sit down with you. I think that's where you build rapport. That's where you can see the client face to face and go over all of the, everything that you offer as a buyer's agent, okay? But if you have somebody who's a real stick in the mud, who's like, I'm sorry, I'm talking to every agent, I don't want to commit, this is your form, okay? And this is basically a showing form. Now, the question I've been getting, as I've shown this to a few agents, is, does this imply agency? And the answer is yes. Yes, you should say yes. Any type of advice that you give to any client implies agency, okay? Now, don't feel bad if you said no, by the way, because logically you would think that a showing agreement wouldn't imply agency, okay? Depends on where you're at in the process. If you're just trying to capture a client and show them a property and they agree to sign this, there still is some implied agency. This isn't a course on implied agency. Well, so we won't get into that, but just know that at some moment in time, somebody could say, well, I relied on this advice from this agent and we signed this form. Therefore, that's implied agency, okay? Just know that this is a way to get the buyer off the hook if they don't want to commit to you. My strong recommendation, once again, is to use the buyer broker agreement, okay? But this is a showing form. They'll initial it, they'll sign it, they're acknowledging. One part that we are wanting to include in this form is an indemnification clause. So that's what I'm working with Deanna on. And the reason for that is we don't want a scenario where there is implied agency and somebody comes back and says, well, I relied on your advice, but you weren't representing me. And we're like, well, you agreed to indemnify us and hold us harmless. So I'm showing you this property. You broke somebody's vase that was worth $10,000 in that property and you're coming after me. No. You agreed to hold me harmless. I agreed to open the door. You broke that liability's on you, okay? So many scenarios now that we may deal with, right? But know that this is an option we wanted to have because we were getting a lot of pushback on just enforcing the buyer broker and getting the buyer broker agreement signed. So you've got a few options. You can sign a buyer broker agreement that includes the whole state of Utah, various counties, one particular property, okay? Or you have a showing agreement that allows you to open doors for people, okay? And if you feel like you want to build rapport with somebody by opening a door for them, and then go over the agreements, that's great as well. Bring the agency agreements with you. Go to your first showing. Build rapport and then say, hey, by the way, the state of Utah requires me to have this form signed. Give them the copy of the buyer broker agreement. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You can, but I requested that you hold your questions till the end. Are you okay to write it down? Okay. And I apologize for being so brass. Let's jump in real fast to this video. Chris, will this play audio?
It should.
Okay.
All right, Craig Wagner, welcome back. I'm UAR Legal Counsel. Peter Christensen, UAR Forms Chair. Well, we want to talk about an exciting change to the real estate purchase contract or the REPC. It is not a wholesale change. There's only one section that's being added and modified, and that's under section 4.3. So looking at the change, we want to scroll down, and this should look somewhat familiar with regards to the real estate broker's payment addendum, because the language is very familiar and similar to that. So here you have this new section. Basically what it does, it allows the buyer to ask the seller if the seller is willing to compensate the buyer's brokerage. Because again, there's some benefits to the seller to agree to something like that. And obviously there's some benefits to a buyer to have that obligation to compensate their brokerage offset by the seller. So it allows them to do that. And then it authorizes the escrow closing office to accomplish that. Any additional considerations as to what this section does?
Well, I just highlight that this is not a new concept. This has been allowable for a long time, that the buyer and seller can negotiate those fees, those brokers' fees, and who will pay them directly in the purchase contract. And that's been allowed for as long as I know. In spite of maybe some confusion on that matter in the past, but always been allowed. We've actually had an addendum for, I don't know, 5, 6 years that has facilitated that. But it's now in the REPC directly and will really be a great tool, an option. It's just an option, and this could be left blank or zero, don't leave it blank. But
Well, and we even addressed that though, if it is left blank, we did make it clear that seller's not obligated to compensate, right? So we did think of maybe that, it's left blank. So for sure.
But yeah, just another way to, another term a buyer and seller can negotiate in a real estate transaction that has the main fee being the purchase price and then a lot of other support fees to contemplate and costs potentially to the buyer or seller that can be negotiated like any other point in the transaction.
Yeah. So certainly if you have any questions, we'll definitely notify you. And I know the Division of Real Estate as well will notify when this becomes available and when you can start using this and benefiting your client. And so this is something to pay attention to on both the buy side and certainly on the list side, because it's now something that potentially has financial implications for the seller. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so we want to show you that because a lot of the language that we just went over, it's nice to see that it'll be incorporated in the REPC, okay? And what he said was key. If it's left blank, the assumption is the buyer gets no compensation, or the buyer's agent gets no compensation, okay? Fill that out. So make sure, so section 4, under the fees section of the REPC, and we can pull this up. Right now, the REPC doesn't show this portion. So what you saw in the video will be added, but that is where you'll go in and ask for your specific compensation, okay? And it should be pretty easy if you've already made the phone call to the listing agent. The listing agent says, yes, I'm offering 2.5%. Great. In your offer, what should be in that line? 2.5%. You should just go, I'm asking for 2.5%. So it's everywhere now. It's in your agency agreements. It'll be on the closing disclosure. It'll be in your real estate purchase contract. It will be everywhere. So full disclosure, all compensation fully negotiated, okay? Now, let me wrap up on this last part, and then we'll get to Q&A. Sound good? Okay, let's talk about concessions. Are they still allowed, and will they be allowed to be displayed on the MLS? The answer is yes. So if you have a client who says, well, gosh, we haven't replaced the carpet in years and it's, a shag carpet and, why don't we offer $10,000 in concession? You can do that. You can put that in the remarks and say, seller's offering a $10,000 concession for A, B, and C, okay? Now, can it be cryptic and hint toward commissions? No. It can't. You can't say seller's willing to offer $10,000 to compensate, period. Compensate what? It has to be explicit. You have to say exactly what those concessions are to be used for. So here's your list right here. You've got concessions that can go toward closing costs, which implies loan costs, cash allowances for repairs and updates, HOA fees and transfer fees, and then covering things like home warranties. And even, I think in some cases, home inspections. So just concessions as we already understand them, okay? Okay, I'm going to train now on how to update your listing on realtypath.com. But I thought I'd actually jump down real fast to the very last line that you see where it says all compensation history will be permanently deleted by August 14th. I imagine the majority of us aren't going to care, but if you care, get on the MLS, go under the listing or the buyer section, put your name in and download all your data. So if you want to see how much you got paid on any particular listing, you are required to go in and download that. My understanding is that the MLS is just doing a mass delete, just going away. Okay, so if you were curious how much compensation was on any particular property, you need to go in and download. And by the way, you can do that on any property, not just yours. So I imagine the majority of us don't care, right? But if you do care, August 14th, it goes away. So prior to August 14th, jump on the MLS and download that information, okay? So before I jump into this portion of the training, I want to make something very clear. You don't have to display compensation on your listing. Okay, that's a misconception. A lot of agents are saying, well, I have to display it somewhere. No, well, you can. Now, if you don't display it, you are required to say something along the lines of negotiable. You know, seller is not currently offering compensation, but it is negotiable. Okay. I highly recommend, once again, that you pre-negotiate that and you do offer it because that's a very common question you're going to get. You're going to get text messages, phone calls from buyer's agents saying, hey, what compensation are you offering on this listing? Okay. And we've spoken to the developer at Pro Agent Websites. He's really cool. He says that we're doing everything in our power to make the search features easier to find so that if someone wants to jump on realtypath.com and go to a particular listing, they'll be able to see compensation, okay? Now let's train on that, okay? All of you currently have a login, and I know this is gonna create a lot of work for poor Chris back there, probably Chris and Amber. You have a login, you may not remember your login, but we all have a login to realtypath.com. And I'm going to log in just as the administrator. I've gotten permission from one of our agents to demo this, but this is what the dashboard looks like, okay? And under the dashboard, you're going to go to Site Editor. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you all have your own login. We will disseminate it to you. So we can reset passwords and stuff like that, but Doug did send that to us. So if agents call asking, we can provide that, okay? And then under the listing section, you'll see at the very top, there is now a link that says buyer agent compensation, okay? And if you want to add a compensation to a listing, you're going to click this green button that says add BAC. And then Greg Wilding, who's Realtypath agent, he's got an active listing here. And hold on, I want to make sure I'm not updating the wrong listing. That wouldn't be good. Okay, yep, right listing. Okay, so this is a home up in Layton. He told me it was 2.5%. So for clarification, this portion down here will be gone come August 17th. You will no longer see on listings the buyer brokerage compensation, okay? But we will now display it publicly on realtypath.com. So I'm going to come in, put in the listing number, percentage of gross, the value is 2.5, and then click save. And now we're done, okay? And so now this listing will have compensation. And let me see if I can just find it. Yep, 2.5 of gross, okay? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you go back to this, you can edit and you can modify it any way you want as a dollar amount or a percentage, okay? And my understanding is that all the other brokerages are following suit. They'll probably have some website. Not every brokerage uses Pro Agent Websites. We do, but other brokerages will have a way to display compensation, okay? So once again, it's not mandatory. You could even put the words negotiable on your listing. You could say commissions are negotiable. But to answer your question, you will reduce a lot of phone calls if you display it somewhere. And I imagine that agents will be like, oh, okay, well, this is a listing from a Realtypath agent. I'm going to go to realtypath.com, use their search feature and see what BAC they're offering. What I think is even more likely in practice is a text message. How much are you paying on that listing? And for those of you who don't know, the division did recently release in their latest newsletter that both text messages and emails could be used against you, okay, and could be incorporated as part of a transaction. That's key. I know this isn't a legal class, but I wanted to share that because things in writing, even in text message, if there's a dispute, what you've put into text can now be held against you. In the past, it wouldn't. You'd have to have an addendum with the client's signature. The division's getting a lot of pushback for this, and you can imagine why. But if I just imagine in practice, going back to compensation, that most agents are just going to ask, hey, I saw your listing on Apple Street. How much are you paying? Or how much is your seller paying? Oh, they're paying 2.5% commission. Okay, great. And then they take a screenshot of your text message, you know. If it changes, I mean, that's probably where there could be arguments, right? Well, when you texted me a week ago, we had it at 2.5. Well, we dropped it to 2. Oh, great. Well, I didn't know that, you know. That doesn't mean that you can't include 2.5 in your offer. You still can, right? Everything is negotiable. So that's where this lawsuit has taken us, is it's taken us to a point where it's all negotiable. What I feel, and I mentioned this in the last sales training, is that we do a lot of work. We're worth our hire, even more now than ever, right? I think it's very important to sell to prospective clients that we are worth our hire, okay? One concern that a lot of agents have is it going to be dog eat dog? There have always been discount brokerages. They come and go, right? I can wink at all of you. They come and go. We can think of one that just went, who's been around for a long time. Will more pop up? Sure. We're seeing more billboards. I saw one the other day that said absolutely free, you know. Now, if you advertise absolutely free, guess what? It has to be absolutely free, okay? Some language that some agents used to use in the past that you no longer can is like half off agent. What does that imply if you're a half off agent? That there's a fixed rate, and there's not. You could say, I'm the 1.5 agent. That's allowed. So stuff like that, you know. Now, could you say I'm the discount agent? Maybe. That also implies standardization, doesn't it? I wouldn't even use I'm the discount agent, you know. Yeah. So some tricky things to consider in your own advertising, not to get in trouble with this suit. And don't you worry, I'm just about to get to Q&A. So, Linda, did I miss any key points?
No.
No. Okay. Then since you right here had the question, the gal right in front of you had the question, let's start there and then I'll go with you. Go ahead. Oh, and by the way, just so that the people online can hear you, we're going to pass around this mic. Just hold it close to your mouth, okay?
The form that you had, that had like some initials there that we needed to add. I was just wondering, was it one or the other, or they need to initial all of them and to agree? It was like the other form, the, yeah, the limit.
Oh, yeah, the showing
I didn't
form.
get to read it very fast. I was just wondering, do they just initial one of those, or they are required to initial all of those?
Yeah, so they are, my understanding is they're acknowledgements. So they're required to initial every single one.
Every single one?
Yep,
Okay.
every single one. Yep.
And then my other question was about so let's say that we're gonna go to all the brokerages and see, because I was able to see it on the phone. I went right now. Do we need to log in? Do we need to make a login for every, or that's something that we can see, right? On every brokerage website?
Yeah.
Without having like a login?
Yeah. Yeah, it should be publicly displayed. So that's a great question. So compensation, if you're going to go to a website to look up compensation, once again, what I think will happen in practice is you'll just be looking at properties on the MLS, and then you'll probably just text message the agent and say, how much is the seller offering as compensation? If you can't get a hold of them and you're like, well, gosh, I really want to know what they're compensating, and let's assume it's like a RE/MAX agent. More than likely, RE/MAX will have a search feature that will allow you to see the compensation on that particular listing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Alan, I'll get to you right after her. Yep, go ahead.
So I had a few questions. So you said it was Utah law to require the representation agreement, but now we have a showing agreement. So can you clarify that a little bit? And also who takes
Yeah.
the liability on when you're taking families around homes if they damage the home? Who's liable for that?
Yeah. Well, so liability already existed even now. But I'll try not to go off on a huge tangent about that, but let's answer your first question. So federally, so nationwide, the requirement for all of us realtors is to have a buyer broker agreement or a showing agreement in place prior to actually taking a client. And where agents, I imagine, will be fined by the ethics committee, right? Probably the ethics committee at the board would be violations of showing people without having a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement. So now back to your question about Utah law. What is Utah law is that you can't draft an offer without having a buyer broker agreement. Okay. The settlement stipulates that you have to have either a buyer broker agreement or a showing agreement to show properties. Utah law requires a buyer broker agreement to draft an offer. Okay. If you guys are curious or even care to know that. So, yep. And then back to your question about liability. The reason why we want to incorporate an indemnification clause is we get indemnified through a buyer broker agreement, even if someone damages something. You know, it's not likely that a committed, loyal client is going to come after you and go, well, gosh, yeah, my child broke this vase, but I'm holding you responsible as the agent. You know, I could see some buyers who are just non-committal, who don't even care about you, coming after you because now they're being sued by some seller. Does that make sense? So, and that's what I mean about liability existing now. If you had a client now and they went through and broke something, the seller would probably try to go after your buyer. But you do have protection with a buyer broker agreement that at some point in time you will be compensated, you know, hoping that that buyer purchases a property.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I had one more question. You mentioned that you can market yourself as a discount agent. I just wanted to clarify because I think that we were not able to do that in our contracts with
So
Realtypath.
you are, but once again, you have to be very explicit. If you're saying that you're a discount agent, I think that's dangerous language because it implies standardization. I think you should run with something like, I'm the 1% agent, or I'm the $8,000 agent. Doesn't matter what property you buy, $8,000, I cap it there. You know, I think we'll see stuff like that. Yeah. Cesar, before you, let's go to Alan. His hand was up first.
In our joint packet, it says we cannot advertise as a discount agent.
Well,
In
good, then we're doing something.
Fast joint
Yeah.
packet, just FYI.
All right, my question is, so the BAC will be gone off of MLS, but can we put down in notes a link to our Realtypath compensation page? Saying that they can just say, refer to this? for
You're saying
compensation?
no. Okay,
Nothing, not even a link?
not even a link.
Okay,
Okay, good. Well, you
they
guys
just
know
have
more than
to
me.
assume that since you're with Realtypath, that
Okay,
they would go to the brokerage page and look for the compensation.
yes. Yep.
Hopefully word gets out then.
I am gonna take mental note of that though, because I wonder if you could even just say, you know, compensation offered for more information, see, yeah, but you're not supposed to link. Yeah. Yeah. Cesar, and then you in front of Cesar. So, yeah. And I wish I knew all your names. If you guys want to say your names, I can start memorizing.
Yeah, my question is about the form, the showing form. Yeah, you mentioned there will be penalties and fees for not having that form. So what about if I'm looking for myself 10 different properties, so I'm taking my dad or my brother. So how do they know if I'm opening these doors to without having that form?
Well, that's a great question. So, and this is actually one thing that our agents tend to get fined often on from the Division of Real Estate. And that is that if you hold a real estate license and you're looking for yourself, you must self-represent. You must, it's required. So if you've ever bought a property and you hold an active license, you run that transaction through the brokerage. You sell a property, you run it through the brokerage. If you're representing yourself, what should you have? Your own buyer broker agreement with your own signature. Yep. So you're covered as long as you have that. Now, I doubt you'll have yourself sign a showing agreement because you are an agent and but yeah, just remember, and I get that phone call probably at least once a month where the division says, I have this agent, there's a complaint on this property. Can we get the details on this transaction? We find out that agent never ran it through the brokerage and they're like, oh, I didn't know I had to. You must self-represent if you hold an active license. So, go ahead, Cesar, sorry, follow-up question? No. Okay, I saw a whole bunch of hands like at once go. Yeah, right here.
Quick question. On the buyer, I'm Holly, and I'm actually a lender, not an agent, but I have a question. So on the buyer broker agreement where you were talking about putting a max compensation, saying 4%, right? Could you guys use the words up to? Could you write
No.
up to on that? No, it has
No.
to be specific.
Great question. So all vagueness must be absolutely removed from any agency agreement. So under your compensation sections, you have to have an exact amount under section 2.1. Okay. Now you'll notice it does say and I've noticed that the majority of Realtypath agents, because of the admin fee, will usually put $395 and whatever percentage they want to receive. But you can't say up to such and such amount. You have to say 3%, 4%, or whatever you want to put on there. So, and we had some up here, but go ahead and start with Sherilyn. Yep.
I just want to say, to go along with that, I've seen title companies sending over the wire instructions, and it'll say all buyer brokers must accompany all offers. So title companies are going to start asking for buyer broker agreements to see what the compensation is in it. Yeah.
And you know what? I think they should have done that
Right.
a long time ago. For those of you that don't know, Sherilyn is actually in our compliance department. So, and come up here when you have, they had their hands up too. So.
Okay, so if my voice still hold out. Dave, I've got a closing in September on new construction. Do I have to change any of those forms?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep. So
what
your buyer
forms?
broker agreement, this addendum to the buyer broker agreement, right, was the second to last one, I think. That right there is that where you would need to update and just get your client to sign this. If you're receiving any additional compensation, then you could use the real estate payment addendum. But if you're not changing compensation, you're just modifying the language so that your client understands that they can't be a part of a future class action lawsuit. This addendum is what you would use.
Okay, so I would just give them the addendum to sign, but that doesn't change what I'm being paid or have any effect, because the buyer broker is for more than what I'm being paid.
Mhm.
So do I have to modify that at all?
So yeah, this is a good question because here's my understanding. And my understanding is if you're currently under contract,
For over
the
a
old
year.
rules apply. Okay. And you don't have to modify. It's not like you're going to go to the closing table and they're going to say, well, it's now past August 17th. Even though you were under contract prior to August 17th, the old rules apply. So you don't have to go and modify contracts that are currently under contract. You just close those out as normal. That's what I've been told. My understanding, well, it doesn't hurt. My understanding is if you go past August 17th, the question that is up in the air is whether or not it has to be done on transactions that are under contract. I think it helps.
I think they said you have to, but you don't have to renegotiate or add an addendum that your fees have changed.
Yes.
Like you would.
Okay.
But you do need this in the file to show because it extends past the 17th.
Okay. Yes.
And I do have one more question. So it's okay to tell a seller or a buyer my fee is,
Yes.
even though that kind of means or implies standardization?
No.
It doesn't.
No, it does not. Yep. Because you get to charge whatever you want. Pick any professional services. What are you going to hear? I'm a plumber. I charge. I'm a lawyer. My fee is $300 an hour. You know, what have you. Right. I think right here. Or did you have one?
See the same question.
Okay.
So-
Do you two still have your questions? Or?
Just a quick question on that listing, the showing agreement.
Mhm.
Is it good for a day, a week?
I
a
think it's good
property.
for,
I didn't see the top of it, so I
Oh.
wasn't sure what the top said.
so my understanding is it is good for, I think it's good forever until you secure a agency agreement.
Okay.
It gives you the right to show properties and not be in violation of lawsuit for not having a showing agreement.
Okay, and then the other thing on both of the new verbiage of the buyer broker is it and the sellers is it says gross commission. There's no option between gross and net.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
It came up in one of the in one of the webinars in the last couple of days. That it just says the gross acquisition price.
Yes.
So I believe after the 17th, net is no longer an option unless it's added into the purchase contract, right?
Right. Yeah, because once again, everything is negotiable.
Right.
So if you wanted it to be on net, my understanding is you can. Why they put the word gross, I don't know. Maybe just as a
standard.
Uh-oh, don't use that.
Yeah, I know.
No, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. We'll take note of that. We'll take note.
Okay.
What else are you? Oh, you have another one.
Yeah,
Keep going.
no, then the second one was in the new Rep C in section 4.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of unclear if that then takes precedent over the brokerage payment addendum, but does it also take over, like the seller is paying, so you won't use basically that seller, the brokerage payment addendum, but you can still have your real estate brokerage compensation agreement because it lists that in the Rep C doesn't supersede. It's basically an addition.
Yes.
To the compensation agreement. So we still want to get the compensation agreement if we want that secure between brokerage to brokerage.
You won't need the payment addendum if section 4 is filled out
Passes.
properly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Morelza?
Was still the same?
For Realtypath,
Yes,
still the same.
the exactly same form.
Same
Okay.
form. Yep.
And another thing, all those forms that you already have highlight what we need to see the most, can you send it to us? Are you going to
Yes.
send it to us?
Yep. So our plan is we're going to do a follow-up email out to all agents, which, by the way, I've had a lot of agents say that they don't get our emails. If you don't, check spam, add us to your safe senders, and then you'll start getting our emails. If you're not receiving them, but we have the right email address, it's possible you unsubscribed from us. And we can add you back in, but just check your emails because we do send often. And if you're like, gosh, I haven't been receiving emails, I have spoken with a handful of agents who emails have been going to spam. So, and by the way, I'll make sure I get all your questions. So even if we have to go a little over, we'll get them all. Okay, go ahead.
Is there a max on what we can charge our transaction fee? The brokerage has
Yes.
capped?
So we have, only because we've seen some agents in the past abuse this. One particular situation where what they were charging as a secondary commission or administrative fee was even more than the percentage, surprisingly. So we put a cap on it. Anything that exceeds $1,000, I think it's $995. Is that what it is? $995 just requires broker approval. So we want to look at it, make sure it doesn't stink fishy, but yes, you can go higher. Once again, it has to be disclosed, fully negotiated, nothing is hidden. So right behind you, Steve.
So I've got one thing on the listing agreement that's probably going to trip up some agents. As it stands on the current listing agreement, the total brokerage fee also includes the BAC, but this new form separates that to where the
Yes.
brokerage fee has its own and the BAC has its own.
Oh, brilliant, Steve. Thank you. I actually meant to mention that. Yes, so let's look at that. So if you look at section 2.2, that compensation, or I'm sorry, no, section 2.1. Okay, so right here, this is no longer, if you were accustomed to putting 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6%, that is not total compensation. This part right here is only the listing compensation, okay? This part down here is the buyer's compensation. So, yeah, Sherilyn.
Can you also tell them that if they do charge a transaction fee, if they add it onto their buyer broker or their exclusive right to sell listing agreement, you don't have to have the separate
secondary,
Realtypath form.
Yes,
And
and
a
I
lot of
think,
agents don't know that.
well, let's clarify that right now. You do not need the secondary commission form if you include in this line and or this line an administrative fee, okay? It's only when you forget it and you're going to charge it that we do require that secondary commission form, okay? Right behind you again, and then over here. Don't worry, I
A
see.
little bit confused on that because on 2.3, it says, company may not agree to a written compensate. Okay, hold on, I'm trying to find it. The payment amount will be added to the brokerage fee referenced in 2.1. I was under the impression that the fee or the compensation you offer to the buyer's brokerage is added up here because that's what it says.
Yeah, I think you may be getting caught up on semantics, but that's exactly what it means. It will be added. This will be added to that for a total payout.
So it's kind of the same,
Uh,
essentially, right?
no, it's separate. This can be zeros and this could be 2.5%. If this is 2.5 and this is 2.5, then the total payout for the seller is going to be 5. So you can put 0 here. You could say there's no compensation because this is the buyer's brokerage. This is for the listing brokerage. So as you're sitting down doing a listing presentation, your seller says, how much are my fees? And you go, well, my fee is 2.5%. What I highly recommend is that you also offer at least a 2.5% buyer's agent. In fact, I think you'll get a better buyer if you offer up to 3%. So now the total compensation is 5.5. Yep. If that makes sense. Yep. No. This is just the listing compensation. Yep. So this is what you are offering or your seller is offering just for the buyer's compensation. And Steve, I appreciate you bringing that up because technically, if you put 6 up here and 3 down here, that poor seller is going to pay 9. Yep. Now, can this be modified? If yes, you could go back and say, I meant to put 3, but I put 6, and there's probably going to be some misunderstandings there. Okay. Yes.
So, if you, on the buyer broker agreement, you had, let's just throw out 2.5%, and then the seller's agent said that they would cover 2. So now in your contract, you're going to write the 2. Does that override what you had on the buyer broker agreement?
No.
Or do you need to add a separate addendum so that the buyer's covered so that they don't have to, so that they're not owing the additional half or whatever it was?
Great question. Now I'll tell you what the default, that's a great question. Let me tell you about the default language. The default language is that any shortage, and we can go there, any shortage will be paid by the buyer. So if you're, yes. Now, if you don't want them to pay the shortage, then you would modify your buyer broker agreement using the buyer broker agreement addendum stating that what was your example, 2.5 down to 2, that the 0.5% would no longer be owed by the buyer. So great question. Yep. Yes.
I'm Carla. So
Carla. Hi.
While you have that up and while compliance is here, if they don't want to commit to anything right off the bat, what do you put in the blanks?
You mean they don't want to commit to paying a buyer's
Can you put
compensation?
just TBD?
No.
All
You would
right.
need to put 0.
0.
Yep.
Okay, because obviously then you.
Now, it's my understanding once again is it says right here, brokerage fees are fully negotiable. Okay. Are we going to see these forms with this blank? Steve, who's also in compliance, by the way. Probably yes, won't we? Yep. I'm sure there will be agents who aren't a part of this meeting who are going to put TBD or
Okay, then.
NA
Okay.
or
As per MLS.
or something like that. So what I would highly recommend is either zeros,
As I know.
or put not applicable or leave it blank.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt to leave it blank, especially since this language, I've been told in the legal world that all caps is a big deal, right? No, everything's negotiable. So it can be modified.
Okay, that was just a side note. Now my real question. I'm going to keep this because I've got a couple. So I generally, when I do a listing agreement, I have a listing agreement addendum that states that, because I'll say my fee is 3%, in the addendum, I do say that if there is a seller offering compensation, that I would reduce my fee as long as it doesn't drop below 2.5.
And I'm not sure if I fully followed you. You said that if the seller is going to offer compensation to the buyer's agent,
buyers,
you would drop your compensation?
if I'm yes, if I am representing the buyer,
You're representing the buyer.
I
Okay.
didn't mean listing agreement. That's
Yeah.
where you got thrown off. If I'm representing the buyer, I will say that my fee is 3%. And then in an addendum, I will agree, because if I am going to agree, it just feels better for the buyer to know that if they're offering compensation to the buyer, but they're offering 2.5%,
You'll take less?
I will take less.
Yeah, so no. What I would do is, now, can you tell them? Sure, you
Okay.
could tell them. I would still write up your buyer broker agreement at 3.
Okay.
Just say, hey, oh, and here's what I've used in the past. I'd look my client in the eyes and I say, I don't want to get in the way of you buying your dream home.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to do everything I can to be fully compensated. But at the end of the day, what's the most important thing? Help you get your home. Okay. Does that mean if a listing's offering less compensation, I'll take it? Yes. However, is there a point where I won't go too low, or I'm not going to go low, where low is too low? Yes. And, but I think it's okay for you to tell them, just say, if the listing's offering more or offering less rather, that you're willing to take less, you can say that. That's totally fine. But remember, what we're being told by the legal world is you can't go the other way.
Right.
If your buyer broker says 2 and now it's offering 3, you have to justify why you're getting more compensation. So.
Okay, and
right
then
over.
just really quick, as far as the showing form, which would be, if they call and they want to see 4 homes, for instance, would it be better just to put those 4 addresses on the buyer
So I think
broker agreement, or is there a space for multiple homes on the?
Yeah,
or does it matter how you
confident that
show?
I'm pretty confident that this form covers every property.
Okay,
Yep, it doesn't have to
Perfect.
specify which, it's just authorizing you to show them. Yep, great question. I saw another hand over here. Okay.
I've had signing listing agreements and buyer broker, where the buyer or the seller are very hesitant to sign because they think they're going to get stuck. The verbiage on that, buyer broker agreement is uncomfortable to me. And I know if it's uncomfortable to me, that will pass off to my buyers. So, because in effect, it's telling them that they have to make up the difference. Now, I know in some cases, this is a conversation we're going to have with our buyers, to where if there's, just like we did with FSBOs, if they're not offering a commission and you still want me to represent you, then you will need to pay me directly. So are we then wanting to talk to them about, these are possible scenarios that might come up. There may be, and they were talking about maybe lenders, including BAC in the loan. I guess I would like to see at some point some models of, like, to watch people talking to people and say, this is how it would look to have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I think you and I were going to role play at some point, weren't we? Yeah, which we may still if we have time. I think, here's my thought. In the professional services world, there are typically letters of engagement, right? Our agency agreements are that. It's a way of saying, I offer these services. Here's what you get in exchange for these services. And this is what you're going to compensate me for. Yeah, that's the hardest thing. I think that's why building rapport with a client, once you build rapport with that prospect and you're trying to win them over, at the end of the day, if they trust you, they're going to sign it,
Make us level up.
Yes. Yep. And the big concern at the beginning was, well, it's going to become more dog eat dog. I think the reality is We all play by the same rules now, right? I would say until they're fully committed, where you let them off the hook is that, right? You're letting them off the hook with this showing agreement saying, hey, I want to build rapport with you. I want to show you my value, my brokerage, as well as whatever the suit. If you want to mention the suit, you can just say, I'm required by law to have this form. However, I can't draft an offer for you until we have a full-blown buyer broker agreement, you know. In this way, I think it makes it even simpler. You are getting some type of commitment, you know, this is your love letter, right? You're getting some type of commitment up front, and getting this signed, I think, is the right next step to a buyer broker. I can just see myself being like, if I'm showing two things, you know, both agreements, and I can convince them to sign the buyer broker, that's the way to go. So, yeah.
I have two questions. One, will you clarify the difference between this and the other, you know, the agency agreement? And then the other is, if I have a listing that goes live the 15th or 16th, we're just doing it regular and then we're taking off the BAC, or just talk about that?
Yeah, it's not until, I don't know why the MLS chose the 14th as the date where they're removing all the old data, but this doesn't go into effect until the 17th. Yeah. Go back to your first question real fast. When you said you, do you mean you as generically, like, will you have to, like agents will have to explain the difference between this and the agency agreement? Or are you wanting me to?
I want you to explain so that I understand what is the difference, because this is creating some kind of commitment, but it's not your buyer broker. So
Yeah.
what is it?
This is just to show homes. This is, so we are now required, you will be penalized if reported. You will be penalized showing properties to buyers without some written agreement. So that's the biggest thing. Now, I'll tell you where, going back to ponying up, right? We really, and not that we want to police, but it's important to police. If you get a buyer who goes, well, I need you to show me this property, and you go, well, I need you to sign this form, and they go, well, I have another agent who shows me properties and they don't have anything. You should be asking, who is that? This is where we will all play by the same rules. A little bit of policing is going to be involved, and hopefully we all just play by the rules. So, yeah.
So I have a question right here. After this form you fill out, and then you need to do something in the computer, how people know that I already did it?
Yeah, so this will be added to our compliance checklist.
Oh, so you have to start the
Yeah. So imagine you're creating a new client in SkySlope, and we'll be going over this with Steve and Sherilyn. It'll be one of your required forms.
Good. And then one
Yeah.
more question. Yeah. So the commission, the buyer agent and the seller agent have to be even now, because it's
No, everything is fully negotiable. So when you're,
no, other side have to be even, because one of them say you cannot get compensate more than the brokerage fee. So
your compensation must match what's on your buyer broker agreement. So I'm not sure if I'm totally following your question, but if you're going to offer on a property and they're offering something that's different than your buyer broker agreement, you will eventually need to modify your buyer broker agreement to match whatever compensation you're wanting to receive.
yeah,
And
but the agent, buyer agent and then seller agent can be different, right? It
yes,
cannot.
yep, they can be.
Okay.
They can be different. Now, I saw like 10 hands go up at once, so yeah.
So if I have a buyer broker agreement with a couple and they want to invite their adult children to come also to a showing before they make an offer, would I need to get those adult children who are not potential buyers? No, okay.
No, you're good. Yep. Great question. Yeah.
So I'm kind of worried, because we're saying, buyer, you have, by law now, you have to sign a buyer broker agreement.
Or a showing agreement.
No, but nobody else is talking about that agreement. They're just talking about the buyer broker agreement. And it seems like it's going to force people into signing something they're not quite ready to sign. Because this isn't, I mean, this says Realtypath on it. I have never seen that before. Is it just you guys that have that
Yeah.
specific agreement. So,
Yeah.
so they're gonna be pushed. And so we're gonna be dealing with buyers who they're like, just wanted to see that one house. And I called the agent because they're the listing agent. And then they had him sign something. And now they lose all their freedom to choose or get to know different people. But I think instead of saying by law, you have to sign a buyer broker agreement, they have to sign either that or an agreement like this that allows them to show, but nobody's talking about that. So we're
Well, I
gonna
was gonna say,
have,
everyone's talking about this. Yeah. Yeah. So if you haven't heard about that this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go over this
Okay,
today,
good.
is because this is actually, so even some counties or not counties, some of the boards, like the Washington County Board, this is very similar
Okay.
to what the Washington County Board is using.
Okay.
Washington County Board decided that we're going to make it available to all the agents.
Okay.
Salt Lake County or the Salt Lake Board didn't do that. So a lot of brokerages are coming up with their own agreement. We
Okay.
came up with our own.
Okay,
But pick
good.
any brokerage, you would have this showing agreement.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
The open house better. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. So listing, so it's going to make listings more competitive. I will say this real fast. I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Go ahead.
A question is more like a comment. So at this point of our careers, whatever is we have 5 years, 1 year, 10 years, why you are going out showing houses without a buyer broker agreement? That is education that you have to do to yourself. You have to put yourself in a good position to go and show houses. You don't lose your time. You don't make anybody lose their time, the sellers, anybody. So have your broker agreement done. If that person really trusts you, they will sign the buyer broker agreement. You don't want to be showing houses and not sell anything.
You help me remember my train of thought, and it goes along with what you're saying. Educate. What? Yeah. Yeah. Morel's up for president. By the way, she is on the board of directors for the Salt Lake Board of Realtors. So thanks for being here, Morelza. Yeah. You've been a part of this, so thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, for what I see, the limited showing agreement is just like a permission to get into people's houses.
Yes.
But if we are going to write an offer, then we need to
Need the buyer broker.
go into the buyer broker agreement,
Yes.
right? This
Yep.
is a permission just to
Mhm.
show houses. No obligation to the buyer to purchase from you if they don't want to, right?
Correct.
And the buyer agreement, it's when you actually gonna write an offer
Yes.
for the buyer.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, since it is 11:30, those who want to get out of Dodge are welcome to get out of Dodge. Remember, there's food out back.
Monarcha Media wants to do a drawing for Parade of Home tickets. So,
Oh, cool.
You guys go get some tickets.
yeah,
Yeah.
before anybody goes, they want to do a quick drawing for Parade of Home tickets.
Yep.
And we want your listing shout out.
Yes. And by the way, I will stay behind. Linda will stay behind. We'll answer any other follow-up questions if it was clear as mud. Okay. Yep.
Okay, want to hurry into your drawing?
Yes, thank you, guys. As you can see on that TV, it's a lot of beautiful homes. We really do marketing for homes in any price point. So we have luxury packages as well as more economical ones, just depending on what the listing needs. But like Linda alluded to, we are doing a giveaway. So we're the media provider for the Salt Lake Parade of Homes this year. And so we want to do a giveaway with you guys and some tickets. To enter, I just need you guys to go on Instagram. Our handle is @Monarcha Media UT. You guys are going to see the first post is a picture of some parade tickets. I want you guys to like it and share the post on your story. And then we're going to leave these tickets with Linda and we're going to announce the winner tomorrow morning. So this is for everyone who's watching online too. Winner will be announced tomorrow morning. So we're excited.
Cool.
Yay.
Thanks.
Hope you guys enjoy.
How many tickets?
8.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's a lot.
There's a good chance to win.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
We have some listing shout outs that we want to talk about.
Oh, good. Okay. Yep.
So